it is a simple concept, but it's often misunderstood. But any conversation about MVP has to start with the goals of a startup, right? That
Okay.
wants, and I will call this like a startup that hasn't launched yet, startup that is just has an intention of building an MVP, right?
Yeah.
So before we get into technicals of how to do MVP, let's talk about what MVP serves, right? What purpose it serves. So as a pre-launch startup, your goals are very simple. I have to be very laser focused. Your goal should be to launch your startup quickly, launch your product, and let's call this MVP. The other goal, as important, is to get customers as soon as possible. As a matter of fact, you will start to look for customers at the same time when you're starting to build your MVP or design your MVP.
Yeah.
And then once your customers have interactions with your MVP, get customer feedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the next step that wraps the whole thing up is iteration, constant iteration on the product. And that's all based on feedback. And I'll go into detail on how do you actually do that. But things before you even do that. Now, the critical thing is what I said was the first one. I said you have to do MVP quickly. You have to launch quickly. And there are certain steps and there's certain methods that you can use, and they work, right? And I'm only talking about startups. Now, there are MVPs in enterprise environments, and I can talk about that later because I also have experience working there, and it is different than experience that startups go through. So in terms of how to do it quickly, the most important thing is to limit the time. Give yourself a limit of time. Say, I will build this in 3 weeks, or whatever the time interval is. And you have to really finish by that date, right? No exceptions. So that's one way to do it. So time bound your building of MVP.
Okay.
Other thing that's very simple, but many times people don't do this, is to physically write down everything that you're going to put into your MVP, right? You have to document it, right? You have to have it in front of you. Everyone needs to know what goes in. It has to be the list, right? It has to exist. It cannot be in your head, and nothing that is on that list should be considered to be put into MVP, right? Only things on that list. So write a list. As simple as it sounds, most of the time it doesn't happen. And very often, always, I would say, you will get into your first, second week and you realize that, looking at how much time you have left, you will realize that there's no way you're going to finish things that you wrote on your spec, right? Because you always overestimate how much time something will take. And especially, it's true when you're building something very new, right? And you have a new team to work with, for example.
Yeah.
So that is another thing. You have to be really diligent and disciplined about cutting your specifications. Whatever you specified, you have to start cutting, right? It doesn't matter. At some point, you'll start cutting important things, but you have to cut. So remember, you're going for time here, right? Mm-hmm. Not for number of things. And then I would say overlaying all that is what can extend the time and jeopardize the time or time delivery of the MVP is that usually people that are building it get really emotionally attached to it, right? They think it's really important. They're really fond of it, and they look at it as an art piece, right? There's something really of high significance. It shouldn't be, right?
Yeah.
It is the first thing that you throw out there, and it is it has to be quick and dirty, right? And should be bad. And you shouldn't be surprised to put something bad out there, right? But a lot of times, we can't disassociate emotional context. So because we're creating something, we really want it to look good. Mm-hmm. And we really want approval from people, from customers. We really, attached to it emotionally. So that is a danger because the more attachment you give, the more you're trying to perfect it, and that more time it takes to do that.
Yeah. I'll never